In this episode, we are discussing a few things that I have noticed about perfectionism when it appears and how to tackle it. Hello and welcome back. My name is Andrei and this is the episode 28 of Decode Your 20s. Now I have chose again the same park to make this video. It is near UCL, the university in London. Now the problem that I am relating to in this video is that perfectionism is a delusion. It doesn't exist, but still it kinda holds every single one of us back from taking action. So I decided to put some more thoughts and come with a description of when perfectionism appears and how it manifests from what I observed. Now let's start with the actual definition of perfectionism. And the actual word perfect defines a state where nothing can be further improved. It defines the absolute maximum of a state that you cannot find any improvement. Now the question is, does this thing exist? If we think about mathematics, there we might argue that perfection kinda exists because there are some theorems which are fundamental. For example, the easy Pythagoras theorem, or some other ones which are fundamental and they will probably never be changed because they are exact. But in reality, like in the actual physical world around us, nothing is the perfect that it can never be changed. It's like saying that you can find a thing which you can't improve, which from anything that I can think of, you can find an improvement to almost everything. So this means that perfectionism is an imaginary word. It doesn't exist, but it relates to our imagination that this state of absoluteness exists. Now let's think about the moments when perfectionism appears, when we experience that. And from my experience, perfectionism, it is strongly correlated with uncertainty and impatience. What I've seen is that perfectionism appears in situations which are usually full of the unknown, in which we cannot fully comprehend or describe into words what is the finish line or the outcome, or how should a perfect solution look like. Whenever we cannot actually describe what we are looking for are the moments where it seems to me that perfectionism come into place. So let's take, for example, the subject of portraits, like a painting of a human. And let's think about Mona Lisa, which is clearly the most renowned and most well-known portrait. If we think about it, some of us might like it, but some of us might have other paintings or portraits that we like more. So it means that other people have found other portraits to be more meaningful to them. So they find an improvement in other paintings than Mona Lisa. This means that actually neither Mona Lisa is perfect. So because Mona Lisa is the most well-known portrait, it doesn't mean that someone can't make a portrait which becomes more famous. Is Mona Lisa perfect? Actually no. And even if it's the gold standard of portraits, it's still not perfect. So again, perfectionism doesn't actually exist. There are other times when we look at things that we might want to do or we might want to achieve. For example, creating the definitive machine learning course or building a billion-dollar company. Things which other people have done, but they seem unachievable to us, and but we still desire. And what I think happens there is that because we want to have them, but meanwhile we do not know how to actually have them, our imagination come into place with possible paths of getting into that position. So our imagination starts to create virtual or imaginary paths of steps that we need to take to get there that do not actually exist, but in our imagination they make sense. Now the problem with these virtual paths is that they do not actually represent reality, and they may not include all the steps that we need to take to get there. So we give a time approximation to each of these paths, and then we choose one. The problem is that because these paths are imaginary, our time approximation is extremely bad. From what I have seen, people, like everyone, are especially bad at making time approximations. We are not simply able to create a time approximate for the tasks that we need to do because there are too many variables which can happen. So our mind starts to fill the unknown gaps in this path with almost random time expectancies, and they just don't fit with the reality. And then what happens is that we start going towards the things that we want. Take, for example, just writing an article. It has never been a time when I expected the time it would take the article to be in the actual reality. Now I started to double the times that it would take, and I can barely get to the actual time it takes to write one. But the point is, because we are so bad at making this time approximations, it happens that the time that we have passes and we start to become impatient because it took more time to do what we had to do than we expected. And there are other things which come after this because you are a human and you have multiple things to do. You don't have just one. And then you become very impatient and the relentlessness comes to appear. And these are the times where I saw that perfectionism is put on a pedestal. When perfectionism becomes that thing which is so hard to achieve that you can never achieve, because firstly, you don't know how to get there, and secondly, you have a bad time approximate on how other people got there. So it becomes something that we want even more, and we put it on a pedestal. Now it happens that we just don't get there. So the point is, in a perfect world, what would happen is that we would know exactly what we need to do to finish what we have to finish, and the time constraints that it would take, and we would get there. I think that in those cases, we wouldn't have to put our imagination to fill in the unknown gaps, and we would get a good time constraint, and perfectionism wouldn't be put on a pedestal anymore. But we do not actually live in that imaginary / perfect world. So let's think about some ways in which we can counter this effect of perfectionism. From what I have experienced, the first step to fight with perfection is that we need to change the word perfection with excellence. I think that we should actually get the word perfectionism out of the dictionary, or put perfectionism equal an imaginary word telling something. But the point is, first step, acknowledge that perfectionism doesn't exist and that you cannot hit perfection because there is nothing that you can hit. And secondly is that we need to start to put so-called acceptance criteria to the things that we want to do. I know that there are things which are pretty hard to actually quantify in how they should look like. It's very hard to quantify, especially into numbers, things that we want. For example, you might want to write an article. How do you write into words an acceptance criteria about that article? You might want to say, I want to write a good article, or an excellent article, or an article that I feel good about it, or an article which I like, or my mother likes. Those things are very subjective. How do you know when you reach the point when you actually like the article? Because it might go to infinities. The point is, I know that we cannot find an 100% good acceptance criteria for those, but we should put an acceptance criteria, even if it's not perfect, so-called perfect. We should put something. So for the things which are poorly undefined, for example, writing an article, it can be, I want to write an article of 2,000 words, and I want it to be peer-reviewed by 2 friends. Now, everything that I just said is quantifiable. How many words you have? 2,000 or less. You have to write more. How many people did you send it and you got feedback? 1 or 2. You got 2, then it means that it's quite good. So that's an excellent article that you might write. Or for example, with learning. Learning is something that takes time, that you can't approximate upfront. And I used to say that I want to learn until I actually understand it. But the question is, what does understanding mean? Like, how do you define if you understood something or not? Now I switched from learning until you understand something into learn until you are able to solve a problem using it. So if you learn something, just take a list of exercises and say, I want to learn this until I am able to solve these 2 exercises. Quantifiable, something which is binary if you did it or not. And this is everything that I had to say. It was more of a monologue, and this video includes some thoughts that I taught for probably the whole university, and now I think that I had something to say. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.